Buckle up, folks. We're diving right into the world of economics, where optimism, skepticism, and downright uncertainty are the order of the day. The global economic outlook for 2024 is a mixed bag of forecasts. On one hand, we have a cautiously optimistic consensus from most central banks and analysts. They're expecting a soft landing, or in some cases, no landing at all. Now let's turn our gaze to the snowy peaks of Davos. Here, experts at the World Economic Forum have their own take. Their chief economist's outlook for January 2024 reveals a majority predicting a mild global downturn. But don't mistake this for pessimism. These economists see it as a healthy correction to inflationary pressures brought on by recent years of robust growth. However, it's not all smooth sailing. Despite the optimism, recent events in China, Europe, and the US remind us that the economic seas can be treacherous. Risks, like undercurrents, are still lurking in the shadows. So, my friends, keep your eyes on the horizon and your hands firmly on the wheel. This economic journey is far from over, but don't get too comfortable yet. Recent events in China, Europe, and the US suggest risks are still lurking in the shadows. Let's get this straight. The Chinese economy's 5.2% GDP growth announcement has raised more than just a few eyebrows. You see, we're talking about an economy grappling with deflation. Imagine a dragon, once breathing fire, now struggling to keep its flame alive. Property prices in China are falling, and demand is weakening. It's like the dragon's treasure trove is losing its glimmer, and the once bustling marketplace is now eerily quiet. Some might ask, why should we care about a dragon's woes? Well, in our interconnected global economy, the health of the Chinese economy matters. It's the world's second largest economy, a major hub for global trade and manufacturing. When the dragon sneezes, the world catches a cold. So what happens if the dragon's economic health continues to deteriorate? Global supply chains could be disrupted, creating ripple effects across industries and economies worldwide. We might see a slowdown in global economic growth, and developing countries, many of which rely heavily on Chinese investment, could be hit hardest. But it's not all doom and gloom. Challenges often spur innovation and resilience. The dragon might find new ways to stimulate its economy, to reignite the flame. There's always the potential for a turnaround, for the dragon to rise again. The dragon's economic woes could have far-reaching consequences. But China's not the only one facing economic headwinds. Heading west, Europe's economic growth seems to be stuck in the slow lane. The continent, home to some of the world's oldest economies, is displaying a rather lackluster performance. Growth, it seems, is not a word that's currently in vogue across the European economic landscape. Indeed, economic forecasts paint a picture of a Europe that's struggling to find its economic mojo. The reasons? Well, they're as diverse as the continent itself. Yet, there's one common thread that ties them all together: an apparent unwillingness to invest in defense. This might sound like an odd correlation, but here's how it works. A robust defense sector can stimulate economic growth by driving technological innovation, creating jobs, and fostering a sense of security that can spur investment. But European countries seem to be shying away from this path. This reluctance could pose significant challenges, particularly if we witness a change in leadership across the Atlantic. In a hypothetical scenario where Donald Trump returns to the White House, his America First policy could leave Europe economically vulnerable, especially if it continues to underinvest in defense. It's like playing chess, really. If you don't think several moves ahead and invest accordingly, you might find yourself in checkmate before you know it. And right now, Europe seems to be more focused on preserving its pieces than on advancing them. Europe's economic performance leaves much to be desired. But what about the land of the free? Across the pond, America grapples with its own set of problems: inflation, deficit, and controversial policies. A significant point of contention is President Joe Biden's Inflation Reduction Act, a trade policy that some are viewing as protectionist. Historically, protectionist policies have had long-term consequences, and this one is drawing parallels to the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930. For those who need a refresher, the Smoot-Hawley Act raised tariffs on thousands of imported goods, which led to retaliatory tariffs from other countries and a massive reduction in global trade. The act is often blamed for deepening the Great Depression. Now, with the Inflation Reduction Act, there's a fear that history might repeat itself. But let's not forget the elephant in the room: America's deficit. Both Democrats and Republicans show little enthusiasm for cutting government spending or reducing the deficit. This political indifference could lead to a deficit-fueled spending spree. And there's the potential for pressure on the Federal Reserve to allow inflation. Inflation, as we know, is a double-edged sword. On one hand, it could potentially stimulate spending and economic growth. On the other hand, if it gets out of control, it could erode purchasing power and savings, leading to economic instability. So, what does this mean for the future of the American economy? Well, it's a complex picture. It's like trying to predict the weather. There are so many variables at play. But what we do know is that these issues are not going away anytime soon. Despite the belief in a soft landing for the global economy, recent trends offer little cause for optimism. But hey, only time will tell. That's a lot to digest, isn't it? But don't worry, we've got your back. We've journeyed through the cautiously optimistic global economic forecast of 2024, navigated the dragon's economic woes in China, scrutinized Europe's lackluster performance, and dived deep into America's inflation dilemma. It's a complex and uncertain landscape, but that's what makes it so fascinating, isn't it? If you enjoyed this deep dive into the world of economics and want to stay updated, hit that subscribe button. We've got more insights, more analyses, and more discussions coming your way. Until next time, keep asking questions and keep exploring the world of economics.